If you're seeing a lots of commercials or marketing on hair growth agents for hair loss and wondering, are these a scam? Are these real? This video is for you. I want to cover this in 5 short points. Number 1, we are born with all the hair follicles that we will ever have. So about 100,000 most people, give or take a little bit. Typically redheads have 10% more. A little fun fact, people that have curly hair may feel like they have more hair, but the chances are they have about the same amount of hair and hair follicles, just the volume seems more with curly hair. So if you're someone, at a certain age and starting to notice, that the hairline sort of starting to recede over here, and of course men and women do it this slightly differently. If the hair is used to be thick is becoming thin and wispy, you're starting to develop a widow's peak. These are some of the early signs of something called androgenetic alopecia. While there's some nutritional deficiencies and things that can also lead to some hair loss, this particular pattern is pretty easy to determine on your own. And if you're not sure, you can check out something called the Norwood scale to kind of show you some of the earlier stages. Number 2, why is it important to detect this pattern early? And the reason is that we need to act quickly. If you're starting to notice some hair loss, unfortunately, your genetics have predisposed you to lose some of that hairline hair, which is eventually going to be, sort of the crown hair, especially in men, and in women, sort of a widening part earlier than perhaps you were expecting. Even if it's an age-appropriate time when you're starting to lose hair, sort of recognizing it is really important, because there's some really good agents that we can use to stop, to halt, and actually reverse some of this hair loss. That brings me to number 3. There are, 2 pillars of a treatment that are really important in any treatment regimen. I see so many people just, either eliminate one or the other due to various reasons. And we'll cover these in more detail in the data in more detail in another video, but it is really important to have minoxidils as an important component of hair loss treatment in everyone. It may be that some people who are very sensitive to it topically can take it orally. So the formulation sort of doesn't matter. You kind of figure that out with your dermatologist or your primary care physician or your telehealth physician. But it is important to have minoxidil if you can tolerate it, because it is one of the best hair growth agents that we know. We'll cover that in a lot more detail in the mechanism of action in another video. Moving to the second pillar, especially for men, it is really important to have something called a DHT blocker, which is a dihydrotestosterone blocker, which is sort of one of the best known pathways that we know how hair loss, occurs in the androgenetic, sort of arena. There's 2 well-known DHT blockers, Finasteride and Dutasteride. They have slightly different pharmacodynamics, and I'm going to cover that in more detail, so you can, determine what's best for you. Again, you can get them in both oral and topical formulations. You can choose the best with your physician. Number 4, this is the kicker when you've had, a lot of hair loss. I get this question a lot, as someone who's had, sort of essentially a completely bald scalp, and they're wondering, or a pretty extensively bald scalp, and wondering, is this something that we need to, that I can do? Would it be helpful? My number 1 question is this something that's slowly progressing, or did you sort of lose all your hair suddenly? Because there is a type of autoimmune hair loss called alopecia areata, which has some really great treatments. So if this is a sudden hair loss, you absolutely have some really wonderful options. Number 5, if this was a slowly progressive hair loss, don't worry. This may not be, the important thing in that scenario would be to set the right expectations. So today, for example, I had, about a 55-year-old gentleman, fairly extensive Norwood scale, I would say a stage 5, Norwood stage 5 or 6, alopecia, and wanted to try hair loss treatments. And I could have gone ahead and just prescribed it and just, let them on their way. But I wanted to stop and just, set the right expectations. And I think that's really important to understand what you're signing yourself for. So the question is, would finasteride or dutasteride plus minoxidil be helpful? And that brings me to my 5th and final point of this video, which is, the answer is yes. It would be helpful, except, you have to know what you're expecting. If you've had hair loss that's been slowly progressing and has worsened over many years, and at this point you kind of feel like there's no hair follicles, it's smooth skin, we cannot bring those hair follicles back. As I said earlier in the video, 100,000 hair follicles, which you're given, and once they're lost, we cannot grow them back based on at least the current science and technology. However, you could benefit from a hair transplant. You would need a DHT blocker and minoxidil ideally before the transplant, because even though while it cannot grow hair in the area where you've lost the hair follicles, it can grow hair in areas where you still have a lot of hair. the minoxidil could be actually very valuable in this space to kind of bring the hair follicles back to life. And as you're sort of like receding the hairline, the finasteride or dutasteride can stop that progression and allow you to have more healthier follicular units for the transplant. You would also need to continue these two pillars after the transplant to maintain the health of those follicular units. Otherwise, you will lose your graft. That's probably one of the most common reasons for graft failure after transplant. This also leads me to sort of a second part of the fifth point. People do often, don't want to start these treatments, even though they've heard about them and they know a lot about them. They don't want to start, let's say, in their 20s because they feel if I start minoxidil, I would have to continue it forever. And the reality is that's absolutely true. You would, if it's truly androgenetic alopecia, you would need to continue it for a while. Doesn't mean that you can't take breaks. Doesn't mean that you can't experiment different formulations. Definitely, you have to do it for what's compatible with your lifestyle, your sort of price point, what's convenient with your daily schedule. But I would not wait to start treatments with the fear that you would have to continue it forever, because otherwise you would continue to have the trajectory of hair loss. So if you're noticing some hair that's thinning, doesn't mean it's going to stop there. It is sort of a progressive process, and you're on the path to having more and more thinner hair. And at that point, it's very hard to reverse. So I hope this video is helpful. If to make some decisions. I hope you don't wait. I hope you get started right away. I have no conflicts of interest, no particular equity stake in any of these companies, so I can say that with confidence. Hoping to help you in the best way possible. Thank you.